3 spine-chilling true stories of sinister coworkers exposed. Unexplained hauntings at the office. When Sarah pulled into the parking lot on that rainy October evening, the office building loomed ahead, a fortress of bureaucracy with every light flickering ominously. This wasn't just a workplace. It was a breeding ground for the unexplained horror that crept along the polished floors and cubicle walls. As the clock inched toward 10 p.m., dread settled in her stomach like a lead weight. There had been whispers, strange rumors, even stories of haunting, and she felt the weight of them press down with every step she took inside. "Did you hear that?" Rachel had asked last week, her voice trembling as they lingered over stale coffee. Chairs moving, lights flipping on and off. It's like someone's here with us. They all laughed it off back then, but laughter only masked their fear. Frank, with his weary eyes, remained quiet. He'd seen too much lately, had too much on his mind. She often caught him staring blankly at shadows like he was seeking something, or fleeing from it. Chairs didn't just slide on their own, did they? But Sarah's resolve wavered as shadows loomed in her peripheral vision while she calculated marketing strategies into the night. Each flicker of the fluorescent lights felt like a warning sign, a shriek of madness waiting to break free. Odd sounds echoed through the long, empty hallways, distant footsteps, murmurs carrying on the wind, chilling her bones. She checked her phone for the time, her heart racing at the thought of being alone long after closing. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. So tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Frank finally spoke, his voice a low whisper, barely above the hum of the overhead lights. "It's Linda, isn't it? She brings a shadow with her." The weight in the room thickened with his words. It wasn't just her, a once bubbly coworker now shrouded in a sinister presence that seemed to pulse around her. Sarah didn't want to believe it, but questionable pranks had turned into whispers of darker intentions. Each unsettling experience coiled tighter around them, tangling them in a web of unspoken fears. The atmosphere grew charged, palpable with dread. With every passing night, misplaced items and eerie messages appeared. Notes scribbled with the deepest insecurities, threats veiled as harmless remarks. Was this hellish game a sick joke? The trio, once friends, felt the icy grip of betrayal wash over them, leaving them questioning everything. A confrontation sparked an unraveling. Accusations flew like arrows, planting despair where camaraderie once thrived. Lightning cracked outside, flashing and illuminating the corners of the room before plunging them into darkness again. Panic clawed at her throat as the machines beeped mournfully, and the whispers turned into echoes of laughter. Alone now, heart racing, Sarah sensed that she was not just trapped by coworkers, but ensnared in something far more malevolent. When a shadow flitted past her office window, she froze, breath hitching. She turned slowly, dread creeping up her spine as darkened faces swirled in her vision, grotesque smiles stretching far too wide. Could she trust anyone anymore? With terror gripping her heart, she realized she had to choose. Confront her demons or flee into the storm outside, leaving behind the darkness that threatened to consume her. As she stood frozen between fear and urgency, the office grew eerily silent, the tension spiraling taut like a rubber band pulled to its breaking point. She was on the precipice of a revelation, one that could unravel everything she thought she knew. The air thickened, heavy with dread and uncertainty. Sarah's pulse thundered in her ears as she briefly considered running. But what would she run from? Her coworkers, her fears, or the looming shadow that felt so alive? The silence stretched like a rubber band, coiling tighter, ready to snap. A flicker caught her eye. Just beyond the glass wall of her office, Linda's silhouette materialized, an unearthly figure lurking in the flickering glow of an emergency exit sign. Sarah squinted, searching for the familiar features of her colleague. But instead she was met with an unsettling shadow. Hollows where eyes should be, a smile too wide, too unnatural. Blood ran cold through Sarah's veins, and a scream built in her throat. Before she could react, Linda vanished, slipping into the darkness. "Get a grip," Sarah muttered to herself, heart racing. She turned to the door, half expecting Linda to burst in, proclaiming it had all just been a joke. But there was no knock, no sound, only the echo of her own breathing, quickening in growing panic. She had to know what was happening. She had to confront this nightmare. Pushing the door open, she stepped into the hallway, each footfall sounding like a drumbeat in the eerie stillness. The fluorescent lights buzzing overhead flickered again, casting ominous shadows. As she made her way toward the break room, once filled with laughter, now steeped in an oppressive silence, she fought the urge to glance over her shoulder. Echoes of whispered fears rattled her mind. What if it's true? Rachel's frightened words echoed back to her. What if she really is bringing something dark? Just then, she stumbled upon an overturned chair in the hallway. It felt like an omen, the remnants of a struggle hidden from her vision. Steeling herself, Sarah ventured further, her eyes searching every corner. Then she heard it, a soft creak and the muted sound of something dragging across the floor. Following the sound, she found herself pushed into the kitchen. It was silent, but the chill permeating the air felt personal, like a cold hand brushed against her neck. She glanced around frantically, but only the shadows seemed to linger. Inside the break room, the tension thickened until it bore down on her chest like a weight. She flipped the light switch. The overhead lights sputtered and blinked before finally admitting defeat. She fumbled for her phone, casting its feeble glow around the room. Papers were strewn everywhere, scattered as if a storm had erupted through the office. The coffee maker was cracked, shards littering the floor like blackened petals. Then she saw it, a note on the table, its edges torn and crumpled. With trembling fingers, she picked it up. The words, jagged and frantic, sent shivers racing down her spine. "I can see you." Suddenly, the temperature dropped even further. She could feel it in her bones, a biting cold. The light stuttered back to life, illuminating the room in a harsh, blaring light. And there, for a split second, she saw Linda reflected in the microwave, her face twisted in a grin, eyes hollow and void. Before she could scream, the lights flickered again. When they died, a soft, sinister laugh echoed off the walls. Her heart clawed at her chest as panic clawed deep. In that instant, she understood the truth. This wasn't just about coworkers or haunting tales. This was something much, much worse. As Sarah turned to escape, the door slammed shut with a thunderous bang, trapping her inside. She pounded against the wood, adrenaline coursing through her. Fragments of shadow danced along the edges, creeping closer, pressing in. And then she felt it. A chill, icy fingers pressing against her back, stealing her breath. "Join us." In a heart-stopping moment of clarity, she realized she wasn't battling for survival against a person, but against something ancient, thriving in the midst of their unspoken fears. As dread enveloped her, another thought pierced through her fog. What had they awakened in their shared whispers? With the whispers growing louder and shadows crawling closer, she had one horrifying question to answer. Was there any way out at all? The shadows writhed like serpents, curling around Sarah as fear constricted her breath. The air was electric, vibrating with a palpable energy, and she could feel every hair on her body stand on end. The laughter echoed in her mind, a mocking reminder that this place was no longer just an office. It had transformed into a prison inhabited by something sinister. "Help me," she cried, her voice a frantic whisper swallowed by the darkness. No answer came. Her heart raced like a trapped animal, and the shadows moved closer, their whispers prickling at the edges of her sanity. "Join us." The words danced around her, a chilling invitation laced with malice. Who exactly was us? She turned back to the door, pounding with her fists, desperation fueling her strength. The wood felt unyielding, and she kicked it, panic rising like bile in her throat. What if she was trapped here forever? What if Linda's twisted fate awaited her? Just when the pressure felt insurmountable, an unexpected jolt cracked through the room, and the lights flickered back to life again. In the sudden brightness, she saw them. A group of silhouettes gathered at the far end of the break room, shadows cast eerily on the wall, waiting like ravenous wolves ready to pounce. Their faces blurred, merging into distorted images that left her breathless with fear. "Sarah!" Rachel's voice broke through the veil of dread. As her friend stepped closer, pain was etched on her face, eyes wide with terror. But behind her the others, their features were twisted, mouths gaping in silent screams. A shiver ran down Sarah's spine. This wasn't right. "Run!" Sarah shrieked, but right at that moment Rachel stopped, locking eyes with the figures. Something was pulling her in. Like her body belonged to another force entirely, she began to move forward, entranced. The shadows thickened, enveloping the break room, casting long, dark fingers toward Sarah, and the flickering light that still struggled to hold on. Frozen in place, she felt an icy tendril of fear wrap around her heart. She had to do something. She had to break this spell before Rachel vanished along with the others. "Rachel!" Sarah shouted, her voice breaking. "Listen to me. They're not real. They're a trick. You have to fight." For a split second, uncertainty flickered across Rachel's face. A flicker of recognition caught in the chaos. But it was quickly replaced by that eerie, wide-eyed look, as if she were the puppet and the strings were being pulled by invisible hands. The laughter grew louder, a cacophony of voices whispering ancient secrets that made her bones ache. "Join us! Join us!" The walls pulsed with a throbbing energy, making her feel small and insignificant. This was more than fear, it was despair, an acute understanding of their mortality, their fragility against an eternal darkness. "No!" Sarah screamed, and with a sudden burst of adrenaline she charged toward Rachel, grabbing her by the shoulders, hoping to shake her awake. The room erupted in chaos. The shadows recoiled, hissing like a cat caught off guard. With a deafening roar, the lights shattered with a loud pop, plunging the room back into darkness. Sarah felt the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes upon her, the shadows clawing and clawing, desperate to reclaim what they'd lost. She could still hear Rachel's soft whimpers mingled with the taunting laughter. Panic surged through Sarah. She had to find a way out. A plan began to form, a chance to distract the dark, lure it away like bait. But did she have enough courage left to confront the horror? Trapped in the darkness, with a sense of impending doom, Sarah took a deep breath. If she wanted not only to save herself but also to rescue Rachel, she would have to face the very shadows that sought to consume them. As she steadied herself, a voice broke through the noise, a soft, eerie whisper right in her ear. "It's not just her. They want you too." The darkness pressed in, hungry and unsatisfied, and panic clawed at her once more. Would she risk it all to shine a light on the truth behind the shadows? Or would fear finally claim her? The final moments loomed closer, and the darkness promised its power, begging her to give in. In the suffocating blackness she understood. Confronting the shadows was just the beginning. What lay ahead was far worse. Were they truly willing to pay the price for survival, or was surrender the ultimate trap? The shadows pulsed like a living thing, breathing and shifting with a hunger that made Sarah's skin crawl. The laughter melted into a low, guttural rumble, vibrating around her like a storm. She could see Rachel, her friend's vacant stare locked on the malignant figures that loomed behind her, slipping further away into a trance as the shadows reached for her. "Come on, Rachel, fight it!" Sarah shouted, her voice raw and desperate, echoing into the suffocating void. She felt adrenaline carving through her panic, a pulse of resolve striking back against the dark. With the strength of two hearts, Sarah pivoted, scrambling for anything, the nearest object she could weaponize against the dark. Her fingers clawed at the nearest fridge, the cool metal a stark contrast to the heat of her fear. The shadows coiled tighter, sensing her movement, their whispers intensifying, urging her to stop. But she couldn't let them win. Breaching the gap, Sarah ripped off a heavy metal shelf. It clattered to the ground, drawing attention away from Rachel. The shadows hissed, recoiling as if stung. The room reverberated with a pulse of energy, a momentary falter in their advance. "Look at me, Rachel," Sarah pleaded, her chest tight. You're stronger than this. Remember the time we... A sharp cut of laughter punctured her words, sending chills down her spine. Join us. The figures now moved with renewed vigor, swinging their elongated limbs toward her like serpents chasing their prey. As Rachel blinked, a flicker of clarity brushed her gaze. Sarah? It was so faint, but it was there. It was enough. Grabbing the shelf, Sarah raised it high, swinging it toward the dark mass. It struck something solid, a glimmer of hope. But the shadows retaliated, their collective force crashing against her, pushing her to her knees. The frantic hissing enveloped her. Join us! Join us! Rachel stumbled backward, vacillation tugging at her will to resist. What's happening, Sarah? The room flashed with memories, echoes of laughter and Luke's insistence that they never work late nights. It was always meant to be an innocent workplace, not this hell. Yet it had turned. Remember the stories? Sarah shouted, her voice slicing through the din. The ones about the office? Remember how we joked they were just rumors? A rift appeared in Rachel's eyes, a crack that suggested if Sarah could just hold tight for a moment longer, she could pull her friend back from the brink. She pushed harder, images swirling through her mind, their late-night chats the warmth of a cup of coffee shared between honest laughter. You are not just a body, you're real, fight it, please. In that instant of connection, the shadows hesitated, their taunts seeming to falter, as if confused by this unwavering bond. Let's go home, Rachel, Sarah cried again, and for that heartbeat it was like the world held its breath. The shadows shrank back, their whispers turning into a frantic buzz, noise blending into the scintillation of lights that flickered cautiously to life, illuminating the cavernous space around them. But it was only a moment of reprieve. In the brightness, the figures began to melt into something more grotesque, morphing into warped visages of people they once knew, faces distorted by pain and torment. Linda appeared, eyes hollow and pleading. Help me! No! Sarah screamed, recoiling in horror. Their ghostly forms surged forward, desperate to escape their entrapment. The shadows thickened around Sarah and Rachel, pulling them in with weighty despair. Fight! Rachel whispered, pulling herself from the grip of the darkness. Fight! Friend! But before Sarah could take a step, a grave silence cloaked the room. The shadows, rattled yet defiant, hissed one last incantation, binding the moment in a desperate spell. Then the lights flickered out again, the cold embracing her like the depths of a frozen ocean. Had they truly escaped, or had they merely awoken terror that now lingered, waiting for a chance to consume them whole? The shadows built their crescendo in the silence, nodding to one another, as if ready for their next sinister performance. And above it all, a haunting question echoed. Would they ever leave this place? Or were they doomed to wander the labyrinth of shadows forever? In that chilling instant, the darkness offered a single nod, and a voice echoed just at the edge of her consciousness. You'll never get out. The shadows writhed and pulsed in the darkness, devouring the faint glimmers of hope that had flickered to life. Sarah and Rachel were cast back into obscurity, the air thick with an oppressive dread that clung to their skin and choked their breath. Sarah felt Rachel's warmth fade, her friend's presence trembling like a candle in a storm. Rachel, Sarah cried, but her voice was swallowed whole by the encroaching darkness. She felt the cold tendrils of shadow wrap around her, pulling her farther into the depths. Fear coiled tightly in her chest, clenched like a fist as she struggled to remain grounded. The sense of loss, of hopelessness pressed harder. She could hear them, the lost souls whispering lies that echoed with promises of comfort in the dark, their phantom fingers reaching for her with a longing that was repulsive yet tantalizing. Join us. She shook her head. No, I won't. Each syllable felt like a shout into the void, draining the strength from her limbs. But then, out of the chaos, she felt a flicker again. Rachel. You're with me, Rachel. The hope ignited for a single desperate heartbeat. Their hearts raced in concert, defiance rising up from the embers of their connection. Sarah could feel her friend teetering on the brink, and she had to help her find her way back. You have to fight. Remember our thoughts. The plans we made. Her voice clawed at the dark, but what she hoped would lift them crumbled before her. The shadows twisted again, and Sarah saw faces. They were faces she recognized, trapped in torment. They twinkled like dying stars in the black, memories of laughter and warmth overlapping with the creeping horror enveloping the location. Linda's face was there again, her features warped, mouth agape in a silent scream. "Help me!" The word slipped from Linda's lips, drifting like a ghostly breeze that chilled Sarah to her bones. "No!" Sarah shrieked, instinct driving her to shield Rachel from the horrifying display. "Don't listen. They are lying." The shadows recoiled momentarily, but the urge to join their lament intensified, pulling at her sanity like a symphony of despair. "Help!" A chorus of whispers, softer this time, coaxing, teasing, reached out to Sarah, promising salvation and betrayal in equal measure. Yet through the noise, she remembered her friends' laughter, their shared dreams, and the warmth of countless late nights spent talking about anything but this darkness. "Fight with me, Rachel!" Suddenly, Rachel's eyes widened, a flicker of defiance sparking life. I hear you." Her voice trembled, barely audible above the cacophony. "I see them." "Yes." Sarah felt the shift in the air. "We can do this together." But the darkness hissed back, furious, coiling tighter. The shadows lunged toward them, coalescing into a mass of jagged teeth, a swirling storm of darkness that wanted nothing more than to snuff out their light. "Together!" Sarah yelled, the word bursting from her lips like a firecracker in the night. They clung to each other, hearts pounding in unison, and with every ounce of strength Sarah summoned every ounce of resolve she could muster. She pushed, against the shadows, against fear and despair. In that moment the office flickered with a light, almost tangible, illuminating their surroundings. But deeper shadows lingered in the corners, swirling just out of reach. Then the ground rumbled, destabilizing everything around them. The ceiling crackled as an unseen presence pressed down upon them, and above the noise a voice resonated through the void, a low, rumbling promise that sent another wave of despair crashing over them. "You belong to us. You cannot escape." As the shadows surged forward, embracing them once again, Sarah braced herself. Would their bond be enough to push the darkness back, or was it merely delaying the inevitable? "Never!" Sarah's defiance echoed into the void as the world spun into chaos, things breaking apart in the chilling embrace of the gathering storm. But in that final breath before all was lost, an answer whispered through the dark, a sinister promise wrapped in a serpent's hiss. "You will learn the truth and dread what comes next." The darkness tightened its grip, the oppressive air thickening like a heavy fog. Sarah felt Rachel's fingers slipping from her grasp. "No!" Panic surged within her, a desperate need to hold on. "Stay with me." But the shadows didn't just listen. They surged. The walls of the office twisted further into the abyss, contorting in ways that felt alive, as if the very structure was in on the horror. A frantic pulse echoed through Sarah's body, urging her to move, to react, to escape. But where? The nearest exit had vanished, consumed by shadow. "Rachel," she cried again, but the echo of her voice bounced back, hollow and taunting. Each whisper from the void filled her head, mingling with memories of laughter, daytime light, and simple conversations turned into echoes of despair. Was there still a way out? In brutality, shadows began to morph, taking form. Figures emerged, elongating limbs and shadowy faces that mimicked the lost souls. There was Linda again, and others. Coworkers whose smiles had often graced office gatherings, now contorted and grimacing in agony. "Help us," they breathed, an eerie choir that turned her insides to ice. Their hands clawed forward, reaching, begging, yet another trick designed to ensnare. She dared not approach. "Fight!" Sarah shouted, the word ripping from her throat, raw and primal. "They're lying. You're not real." The darkness recoiled, but it was only a momentary retreat. She could hear its low growl, rumbling like thunder, rising into a frenzied roar. "Fight, Rachel! You have to fight!" Panic transformed her voice into a jagged edge. scraping against the oppressive tendrils of shadow. She could feel the fear radiating from Rachel. It was palpable, tinged with the scent of sweat and desperation. And then, silence. The haunted faces froze, their expressions contorting into an amalgamation of pain. The air stills, is dense with the haunting weight of the loss around them. "Let's break it," Rachel's voice pierced through the silence, her conviction ringing. "We're stronger." The shadows hesitated again, inching backward, but their presence remained thick, a looming threat ready to swallow them whole. Somehow together, they tunneled back into their shared memories. The time spent planning for a future job, arguing about who made the best coffee, and the hope nestled in every whispered secret. Suddenly, warmth surged from their linked hands. It lit the darkness like a beacon. A flicker more vibrant than before danced at the center of their clasped fingers. "We can use this," Sarah urged, their heartbeats synchronizing in defiance of despair. The shadows shrieked, screeching as the light brightened, washing away their forms like waves erasing footprints in the sand. Lines of fear crossed Rachel's face as she pressed closer. "But what if we can't hold it?" "Together," Sarah panted. "We have to trust each other." With that, they surged forward, the light spilling around them like a protective layer, radiating hope in their unity. But the shadows were relentless, clawing back, attempting to snuff out that spark. "Stay strong," Rachel cried. The light pulsated with intensity, battling against the gathering darkness, but each surge brought a new threat. A guttural roar echoed from the depths, as something monstrous lurked just beyond the light's reach. The shadows began to converge, trying to envelop their glimmering shield, the promise coiling tighter with each passing moment. As Sarah pressed on, fueling their connection, she felt the ground beneath her shift again. The vibrations quaked through her like a warning. "Something's coming," she shouted, her heart racing into panic. Before she could brace for it, a blinding flash erupted through the darkness, illuminating everything for a breathless second. Then darkness slammed back, more feral, more chaotic than before. "Rachel!" Sarah screamed, eyes wide in horror as a chilling presence snaked through the air, wrapping around Rachel's waist. It was as though the very fabric of reality had begun to tear. "Together." Rachel's voice faded into the abyss. And in that moment of harrowing uncertainty, Sarah gasped, "What do they want from us?" A chilling silence filled the void, and from it, a new voice emerged, smooth and dripping malice. "You'll find out. Very soon." Their bond trembled in the face of that darkness, and as dread clawed at her heart, Sarah realized there was something lurking in the shadows, something far worse than lost souls. And they were not alone. The air crackled with an unnatural energy, a magnetic tension that pulled at Sarah's very core. The walls of the office, once familiar, now shifted with malevolent intent, oozing darkness and despair. The shadows that coiled around her and Rachel were no longer just mere echoes. They had grown, morphing into something dangerously sentient, something hungry. "Let go of her," Sarah roared, adrenaline fueling her body. That fierce light from their hands flickering weakly as shadows lashed out, grasping at the strands of hope. Rachel's terrified cries bounced off the walls, merging with the distorted wails of their former coworkers, now faces twisted in unrecognizable torment. The presence coiling around Rachel tightened, squeezing her breath to a panicked wheeze. "Sarah," Rachel gasped, her eyes wide, pleading, "don't let it take you." The desperation in Sarah's voice pierced the choking darkness. She yanked on their connection, desperately sending vivid memories to bind their spirits. A day at the beach, late-night brainstorming, and laughter that filled the sunlit office. Each memory ignited a flicker of warmth between them, pushing back the icy tendrils that tried to sever their bond. But the shadows shrieked again, a dire cacophony that sharpened into a single, unholy sound. It was a voice that reverberated through her bones, malicious and hissing. "You cannot escape. You belong to us now." As that voice echoed, Tendrils lunged forward like dark serpents, snatching at Rachel, squeezing tighter. Panic seized Sarah, paralyzing her with fear, yet she knew surrender was death. She took a bold step forward, shoving against the crushing darkness, willing the light from their clasped hands to grow. "Rachel, focus! I need you to fight." There was a tremor in Sarah's voice, the weight of dread pressing against her chest. With a fierce determination, Rachel thrust forth her own memories, her own laughter and dreams, ancient and vital. That fierce warmth in their hands brightened momentarily, a burst of defiance that sent shockwaves through the shadows. The darkness quivered, but the presence growled back, furious. "You foolish children, this is just the beginning. You cannot resist us forever." A flicker of hope ignited, but Sarah knew it was weak, barely illuminating the encroaching shadows. "We're still here," she shouted, the sound almost swallowed by the encroaching void. But then, a terrible rumbling shook the ground. A monstrous growl, deep and roiling, filled the air. And from the depths of the darkness something unfathomable began to emerge, a creature pulling itself out from nightmares. Eyes glinted with malice, peering hungrily at them both. "Run!" Rachel screamed, her eyes wild and searching. In that instant, instinct kicked in. Sarah jerked Rachel close, clinging to her as they sprinted forward, searching for an escape that felt as elusive as the vanishing light. The shadows snapped at their heels, grasping, clutching, hungry for flesh and fear. Where do we go?" Rachel's voice trembled, the weight of terror heavy in the air. "I don't know. We have to find a way out." They stumbled forward, bombarded by sensations, prickling fear, the taste of dread tang on their tongues, sweat stinging their eyes. The pulsating mass of shadow behind them roared again, a hungry entity willing to consume everything in its path. Then, within the chaos, they spotted it. A doorway, barely illuminated, the outline flickering. But it was the only chance they had, too fragile to let slip away. "Go," Sarah urged. With every ounce of strength left in her body, she pulled Rachel towards that faint hope, the dark shadows trying to encircle them once more. As they reached the threshold, just as Sarah threw herself through, she glanced back. What loomed behind them was no longer just an entity of darkness, but a face, a grotesque, hideous grin mixed with seething rage. The door slammed shut behind them, a sickening clap of finality, but the darkness cracked it open, a sliver of malice still clawing at their heels. "Where now?" Rachel panted, as all around them swirled the remnants of darkness, the flickering light scarcely illuminating their surroundings. What if this is worse? Anxiety twisted Sarah's insides, a feeling of dread clawing at her heart. Maybe there was nowhere to hide. Just then the ceiling began to tremble, splintering sounds invading their space. And from the cracks more faces began to emerge, beckoning with silent screams that froze Sarah in place. "Sarah?" Rachel yanked her back, barely evading the hungry grasp of the shadows creeping through the fissures. "What if we can't escape?" Sarah whispered, chilled to the bone as the laughter of the damned echoed around them, promising despair and chaos, a reminder of the unseen horrors yet to come. And as the darkness continued to crackle around them, the last whispers of former souls filled the air, intertwining with the ominous growls of something waiting just out of sight, ready to pounce. "What if we can't survive this?" Rachel gasped, eyes darting around for something, anything. In the heart of turmoil, Sarah felt the flickering light begin to flicker, and at that moment, her heart sank. "We have to give them what they want." "What do you mean?" But the question faded into the abyss as the shadows pressed closer, the answers ready to devour them both. The very air around them thickened, a suffocating weight that pressed brutally against their chests. Shadows writhed like living creatures, contorting in the dim light from the cracked walls. Frantic noises, indistinguishable whispers, swelled and receded, an orchestra of torment drowning out Rachel's panicked breathing. "Sarah!" Rachel's voice quaked, barely more than a whisper. "What do we give them?" The flickering warmth between their hands pulsed weakly, at the mercy of the encroaching dark. It had become painfully clear that those sinister desires of the shadows were not for mere torment, but something grotesquely sinister. They wanted their will, their very essence. They want us to surrender. The gravity of Sarah's realization sent her heart racing against the confines of her chest. How could they fight something that knew their innermost fears so intimately? As the shadows continued to stretch and twist, something darker flickered at the edge of her vision. A darkness that wasn't bound by the walls of their prison. It lurked just beyond the threshold, stirring in the corners of her mind, whispering promises that clawed at her sanity. Give it what it wants. Rachel edged closer, her expression contorted with dread. We can't let it win. They're just memories. Sarah's voice fought to remain steady, despite the rasping fear wrapping around her throat. They want to consume our past, our failures, our fears. If we show them our strength, we can defy them. Panic washed over her as Rachel's face drained of color. But they are our memories. No, Sarah insisted, clenching Rachel's arm. They're our power. Let's show them how wrong they are. The shadows screeched in protest, but as Sarah closed her eyes, she felt the warmth begin to swell again, chasing away the chill that threatened to consume them. She summoned everything. Her first heartbreak, the sting of betrayal from a once trusted friend, moments of self-doubt carved into her soul, not out of despair but as fuel. She focused on those memories, feeding the light within her, forcing it to burn brighter through the cracks of impending darkness. Fight, she shouted, the words breaking through the din, her heart a drum in her chest. Fight with me. Rachel, reaching deep within herself, conjured up the memories of her dreams, her aspirations the moment she realized she could help others, all laced with laughter and triumph. The warmth between them flickered back to life, intertwining with their manifested powers, tearing through the shadows like fire through fog. Twisting tendrils recoiled. Echoes of rage morphed into shrieks of outrage. It was a war of wills, the shadows thrashing violently in reaction, desperate to consume that flicker of defiance. But just as hope filled Sarah's heart again, she heard a strange echo ripple through the darkness, a chorus of voices, sinister and sweet. You think you can survive? Alone? Panic twisted Rachel's features and lodged in Sarah's throat. What does that mean? The darkness whirled around them, shaping itself into grotesque forms. Faces they recognized just enough to make their hearts race. Coworkers, former friends, each twisted visage bore the weight of ancient pain that coursed through their ranks. No, Rachel gasped, stepping back as a familiar face lurched into focus. David? He wants you both, hissed a voice from the shadows, deep, low, tinged with dark amusement. You've already begun to understand that giving up is easy. It's the hope, the memories. They want to drown in despair, don't you see? Sarah turned to Rachel, their palms still melded together, desperately searching for resolve. But the shadows shifted, revealing more faces, more memories, and each one pressed cruelly against their hearts like a bitter reminder. It won't stop, Rachel whispered, trembling. They'll take us if we don't find a way to escape now. The ground trembled beneath them, promising instability. The air vibrated with something more. It felt alive, anticipating their next move, hungry for a slip, a falter. With each flicker of light, the darkness leapt closer, but Sarah squared her shoulders, refusing to be cowed. If we're going down, we'll go down fighting. As her words echoed, the shadows swarmed, hungry tendrils reaching for them. But this time they charged, plunging deeper into the dark, thrusting memories outward as piercing weapons of light. Bursting forward, they closed their eyes, summoning the last remnants of warmth forged within. The shadows shrieked, the cacophony a tornado of fear as the two girls hurtled into the pulsating heart of darkness, determined to regain control. And then almost suddenly, there was silence. The memories warped, all-consuming, enveloping them until they felt weightless in the void. But somewhere in that heart of despair, something stirred, a flicker of the primordial fear that had driven them here. Wherever they had gone, they weren't alone. The eyes of countless souls watched, waiting for their chance. Is this our end? Rachel breathed, fear darkening her voice. The darkness stirred, a low growl echoing around them. Or has it only just begun? Eerie stillness engulfed them as the oppressive void shifted, an unseen weight pressing down hard. Moments stretched like shadows, wrapping Rachel and Sarah in a clammy embrace of apprehension. The air crackled, heavy with unspoken threats, and just beneath the surface, the whispered promises twisted into a chorus of discord, each note sharpening the dread that settled around them. After what felt like an eternity, a flicker of movement ignited the darkness. Forms began to materialize in the blackness, each soul cloaked in despair. They were spectral representations of all they feared, their dreams morphing into nightmares. Blurred faces twisted into grotesque parodies of laughter they once shared. Anxiety pulsed through Rachel as she recognized her colleagues. Jeremy, with his easy smile, now reduced to a gaping maw of silent screams. A former friend, Rebecca, her eyes hollow, reaching desperately as if clinging to a time they'd walked side by side. "Stop it!" Sarah yelled, raising her hands as the light between them flickered uncertainly, teetering on the brink of extinguishment. "We won't be part of this." But the shadows only deepened, greedily absorbing their defiance. A cacophony of wails erupted, echoing around them, drowning out rational thought, sinking them deeper into despair. Rachel gritted her teeth, refusing to bow. "We have to hold on." She felt the warmth between her and Sarah pulse faintly, a beating heart fighting against the suffocating darkness surrounding them. "Remember who we are. We can't let them take that." As she focused, memories surged forward, raw and vivid. Flashes of joy, moments of laughter intertwined with warm, starlit nights filled with hope. She pulled Rachel's gaze with determination. "Think of everything we've been through. We're still standing." Their bond reignited. The warmth surged once more, pushing through the shadows. The light morphed, expanding within them, a beacon against the confusion threatening to swallow them whole. "You think those memories empower you?" The deep voice from before intruded again, echoing ominously through the rift, almost playful now. So naive. Laughter rippled through the chaos, but this time Rachel and Sarah weren't alone. They could feel the souls around them, their voices harmonizing with defiance. They weren't just faces. They were an army of willpower, stoking the embers of resistance. "Together!" Sarah shouted, her voice an unyielding rallying cry. "This is our moment. They can't take what we hold dear." The space around them crackled with vibrant energy. To their surprise, every face they recognized stopped their torment, their cries somewhat muted, converting anger into an unlikely solidarity that pulsed alongside Rachel and Sarah's burgeoning strength. The captured memories turned, eyes wide, mirroring determination. The shadows recoiled as if held at bay by an invisible wall. Each tendril quivered, shrieks wafting into silence. For a heartbeat of hope had ignited not just within Sarah and Rachel, but all those trapped within. The ground beneath them pulsed, vibrating with emotion, fear flipping to anger. But just as freedom seemed within grasp, the darkness surged again, more furious now, as if it sensed its moment slipping away. Tendrils lashed forward with renewed vigor, whipped by fury and desperation. "Don't stop," Rachel yelled, feeling her voice ignite strength within their gathering. "We'll push through." But even as their combined power illuminated the space, the shadows throbbed violently in response. A voice rumbled deeper, eyes piercing through the swirling blackness. "Your power is a mere flicker, easily extinguished." The ground shook violently, twisting underfoot as despair clawed back into the depths, threatening to swallow them whole. And then, horrendous grins emerged from the depths, the rage amplified, consuming the resolve they fought so hard to build. "Are you ready to play, or will you fold?" In the face of that ultimatum, panic gripped them tighter than before. "Rachel, hold on!" Sarah's voice cracked, as the tendrils began to coil around them, hungry for surrender. But another whisper, softer and yet more urgent, cut through the din. A fragile promise. "The choice is yours." They stood at the precipice. In that moment, beneath the looming terror of isolation, the bonds of courage trembled, flaring defiantly against despair. But the shadows swelled, eager to consume. Will they break together? or will the light fracture them apart? That question lingered, like the dark breath of the void, as they teetered closer to the edge of oblivion. The air thickened, dread hanging heavily in the office as Sarah and Rachel stood, their hearts racing like wild horses. The shadows surged forward, a wall of darkness pressing relentlessly against them, whispering promises meant to devour their spirits whole. Yet in that moment of suffocating fear, a flicker of resolve ignited between them, glowing against the crushing weight of despair. "Together!" Sarah shouted, gripping Rachel's hand tightly, anchoring her friend against the tide of darkness. "We have something they can never take, our memories, our friendship." The shadows hissed, recoiling at their defiance. But it was no reprieve. The whispers multiplied, amplifying their fears with each syllable. "You're not strong enough. There's no way out." "No," Rachel cried, piercing the cacophony with her fierce determination. "We've survived worse. We refuse to let you take us." In that shared fire, every moment of joy, every stitch of laughter surged between them, like the flickering of a long-dead flame reignited. Memories of late nights filled with cheerful chatter, the comfort of shared dreams, and the safety found in one another began to weave a tapestry of light that the shadows struggled to engulf. "Together!" Sarah called again, feeling the pulse of their growing energy. "Remember everything we've faced. We're not just two against the dark. We're a whole army of hope." With that declaration, their bond swelled brighter and more powerful, igniting memories of everyone they loved, felt safe with, and fought for. The very essence of their shared experiences began to pulse, not as isolated memories but as a tidal wave washing away despair. The darkness, furious, writhed around them. Yet the shadows lost their grip, slipping like sand through their fingers. The air crackled with energy, illuminating the space as the grotesque faces twisted in anger, drawn by the force of their light. In a crescendo of defiance, Sarah roared, "We are not yours to consume." With her words, a brilliant light erupted, casting the shadows back, illuminating the office and shattering the illusion of despair that had encased them. Rachel followed suit, her voice joining in the powerful roar. "Leave us be! We are free, and we are fighting back." For the first time, the faces in the dark faltered, anguish mingling with realization that they no longer held sway over Sarah and Rachel. The shadows screeched, their rage resounding in a cacophony of reunited voices. They pushed forward, that light growing brighter, surging through the darkness. As they advanced together, tendrils of shadows shrank back, dissolving beneath their fierce bond, devoured by the radiant warmth they radiated. Suddenly a door appeared before them, glowing faintly as they approached. "Is it real?" Rachel's voice trembled, the flicker of doubt surfacing amidst the joy of their victory. "It has to be," Sarah replied, calmed by the hope of escape, her heart thundering in exhilaration and fear. Clenching hands, the two surged toward that door, drawing strength from every joyful memory, every moment they had shared. The light enveloped them completely, and with a final push they burst through. The office around them quaked, shadows receding, spectral cries echoing into nothingness as the door slammed shut behind them. Panting, hands still entwined, they found themselves standing under the cool autumn night sky. Stars twinkling fiercely above, full of possibilities and freedom. Their hearts raced, not solely from adrenaline, but from the electrifying understanding they had battled the dark and won. "Did we really escape?" Rachel murmured, disbelief lacing her tone as they turned back, half expecting shadows to emerge. Sarah's face softened into a smile, tears glistening in her eyes. "We did. We faced our fears and cast them out. Together, we're stronger." They sank into an embrace, feeling the weight of everything they had yet to say, memories of fright and shadows giving way to laughter and light. In the silent aftermath, they held on to each other, knowing they would never take a single moment for granted again. As they began walking away from that once haunted building, wings of fresh possibility rustled in the air. They had reclaimed their lives, together. But somewhere in the darkened corners of that office, whispers still echoed, threaded with malice and untouched resentment. Waiting, biding their time until the unwary might slip back into their web once more. But for Sarah and Rachel, the dark would never reign again. Their spirits, bound forever in friendship, promised resilience with unfaltering strength. Don't you dare miss what's next. Subscribe immediately to our channel so you don't miss the spine-tingling exclusive stories coming your way. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and keep us firing on all cylinders. And we want to hear from you. Flood that comments section with your reactions and theories about this eerie conclusion. Instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see what happens next. Take action now. This is your moment to show your support.